In this video, I'm going to show you how to complete the next part of 5.2b, the Automoblox Windshield. They give you a lot of directions on a lot of tricks that you can use, and we'll use most of them, but if you want to follow along with me, I promise you the way that I do it does work, and it matches most of these dimensions and directions that you'll see throughout all of this part of the activity. We'll complete the windshield up through the point that we have shelled the bottom of it, and then I'll show you how to create this inside portion of it, and we can even go on to color it so that it looks like a clear green, almost glass or plastic look to it. So start off with creating a new part file, just like we did before with the body of the Automoblox vehicle. While that's opening up, I'll bring this back to the beginning and remind you that the other thing you'll want to have is your T9 dimension drawing sheet, and scroll down to where you have the windshield dimensions. We'll use most of these as we move along. Alright, like always, create a new 2D sketch, and I'm going to select the YX plane. I'm going to select this plane since in this case I want to extrude from a profile view back away from it, and then treat it as this object that I can shell from below, and then add that bottom portion to it that snaps into the truck's body. I want to go back at this point, and under Tools, Application Options, and under the Sketch tab, turn off the Snap to Grid and say OK. You could probably do this with snapping to grid, as you'll place most dimensions by typing them in, but I don't want to be constrained to a grid point at any time during this. And it's important that we look at these dimensions as we move along, so I'm also going to temporarily pull my Inventor window over and let it take up half the screen. I'm not going to start at the origin this time. I'm just going to start in this upper right quadrant area. I'm not really worried about the grid system at this point. So now that I have my sketch started, I want to select my sketch, be in my sketch mode, and start with a line. I'm going to create this bottom line first, and then I'm going to use 3 arcs. This is an arc with a radius of 6, this is an arc with a radius of 4, and this is an arc with a radius of 6. Excuse me, this arc has a radius of 0.4. And this arc with a radius of 6 also has a height of 0.64. This arc is located in 2 places. The left edge of it, which is located 3.01 inches from the right, and this point of it, which is located 2.55 inches from the right. This arc, this big 6-inch arc, has a height location of 1 inch from the bottom line, which doesn't have a location, but rather just has a size of 3.04. So let's get started. I'll just pick any random spot up here in the upper right quadrant, as long as my line is horizontal, and I put it in as 3.04 and hit enter with a horizontal line. I can then move on to the next part, which in this case will be to create an arc. There are 3 different types of arcs. There's a 3-point arc, a tangent arc, and a center point arc. I'm going to go with the 3-point arc. Starting at that end point of the 3.04 horizontal line, I'm going to stretch out into the left and up direction and place a line that has no particular distance. As long as it doesn't come past this end point of my first line, I'm good to go. Doesn't need to be extreme in any direction, so I shoot for somewhere around that 30 to 45 degree range, and then I bow it out, not in, but out, and I put in 6 as my radius, and I'll hit enter. Now before I move on, I'm going to go ahead and dimension this. Now remember, it has 2 dimensions. It has a height location and it has a width location. The width is what I'll do first, and I'm going to click on the end points of the line, here and here. And if I pull my mouse up, it gives me the width. If I pull it to the right, it gives me the height. I'll start with the width, and I'll place it right about here. And then I'll call this dimension 2.55 inches. Hit enter. And then I'll place another dimension for the height. And bring it out here. And call this one 1. And lines move around. You'll see I don't want to be constrained to any kind of grid point or locked into any origin point. I want to let it freely move about. I'll right click and say that I'm done with dimensioning. And then I'm going to come down here just to help clean some things up. And I'm going to grab this 6.0 and drag it just up slightly like this so that my dimensions are all constrained in a smaller area so that you can see them easily. I'm also going to pull this 3.04 down a little bit. And I don't mind that the extension lines are crossing, even though that is a guideline we want to try and not do whenever we put things like this on a drawing sheet. I'm going to leave them as they are. It's almost unavoidable, as you'll see over here. Notice that I'm not letting the leader line cross these extension lines either, just to help keep it clear for you. Not a big deal. As long as you know what's going on, you can keep your dimensions wherever you'd like. I'll choose another 3-point arc, and this time I'll start at the original point of my 3.04. That's the left point, the left starting point of that line. And I'll click once and move my mouse up and to the right ever so slightly. I don't want to cross up above this line. It's unnecessary. And I don't want to go too far to the right. So just a little bit, and then I'll bow that out to the left. Not going too extreme and certainly not letting it snap into any place in particular. I'll apply, oops, I will apply a 6-inch arc to that. So before I click to place it, I need to type in 6. And I now have my arc with a radius of 6. I need to follow up with some other dimensions for it. It has both a height and a width. We'll do the height first this time. And it has a height of 0.64. And its width now does not go to the bottom left corner. You could do that if you wanted to do a little bit of math. But if we're going to follow the dimensions they have here, I'll take that end point and come all the way over to the right end point of the 3.04 and then go up. And this dimension should be 3.01 inches. Everything shifts slightly. That's okay. I now have a size dimension for this arc. I have a height dimension for the arc. And I have a width dimension for the arc. So I've located it with 2 dimensions and I've given it a size of 6.0. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this guy on up here ever so slightly. Notice that it creates kind of a continuation of a line. Okay. Now, I believe they tell you in the directions that you should create a tangent arc here. You can get away without doing that, but if you'd like to play around with tangent arc, you're welcome to try it. I'm going to continue with a 3-point arc because I do know the 3 points. I know where it starts, where it ends, and the point at which the radius should be 0.4. So, 1, 2, making sure that I hit those lines, zooming in just to check, make sure I'm touching at those points. Bow my arc out to the left and up ever so slightly, and put in a measurement of 0.4 for the radius. If I've done all things correct, if this point is coincident with the first arc, and if this point is coincident with this arc, then we're good to go. This should be tangent to here. I can check that by going into my constrain panel on this ribbon and find that tangent constraint and click on the 2 arcs here and here, and it should tell me that it is over constraining it because it's already meeting those 2 constraints by having the 2.550 and by having the same dimension of 3.01 all in width, and then also having this radius. And if I can double check that here, I get the same thing. It is over constraining it. Now if we go back to our activity sheet, we find that we want to start editing the sketch by allowing for some tangent constraints to be placed, and they get into some discussion of how doing this will allow us to have an edge that we can properly fillet and do what we need to. And the edge that they're talking about is literally the profile that you see, and you'll see this in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, even though I know that they're tangent with each other, is follow their directions of deleting this dimension and this dimension, and then applying that tangent constraint that I applied or tried to apply a moment ago. And we'll see that now it accepts it, and I get no warning about it over constraining. I can even prove that they're accepted by pressing F8 on my keyboard, or by right-clicking and telling it to show all constraints. So at this point, it's completed as far as the sketch is concerned. And I can start to move on. It now tells me to extrude the part, the measured width. And the only way for you to really tell what that is to look at your T9 dimension drawing. And we see that from above, it tells us that it's 2.55 inches in depth. We also know that from looking at the next part, which says 2.55. So here we have the ability to finish sketch, go through the extrusion process, allow it to consume sketch 1 when it extrudes it. We want it to extrude away from us, not toward us. So once my computer catches up, we'll go away, 2.55. And we'll see that it looks basically like what they're showing us here. Now I'm going to forego giving it any of this green look to it just yet. We'll do that at the end when it's all completed. It makes it a bit easier to tell what's going on, in my opinion. The next thing that they tell us to do is to keep working with this and make these two fillets on either side. And this is where we needed to fillet the edge that is the profile that we extruded. So under my modify panel, you will find fillet. And this is just like the fillets that we do two-dimensionally. However, we have a few more options. This is now a three-dimensional feature as opposed to a two-dimensional feature. It's where I've taken something that is two-dimensional, extruded it, and then now taking that edge that is set at a sharp angle and rounding it off as a round, or if it's an inside edge, rounding it off as a fillet. Now the tool is called fillet, but what I'm technically doing here is a round, and I want to apply a 0.5 fillet to it. Notice that this fillet is not nearly as large, but I've already selected it, so I simply need to change the radius of that fillet. And I can select multiple edges for fillet at one time. So I'll also select this edge over here, and I can hit apply if I know that I have more fillets to apply, but I don't. I only have these two, so I'll say OK. It applies and closes the window. The next part is to look at the underside and to shell this underside, and what that does is it removes all of the material except for the amount that has been identified. Now, if you zoom in on your activity sheet, you'll find that they tell you it is 0.07 inches. And that's really hard to read on here. And the only other place to get that information is, yep, you guessed it, the T9 drawing sheet. And the only place they truly tell you what it is here on this front view, and here on what they're calling their top view. However, this really is the best front view, and as you can tell, there's a section view indicated by this section line. Now this gives us good contour and a lot of detail of shape, but so does this. It doesn't really matter at this point as long as we understand the two views are related to each other. And if you look at the isometric, you can see that this isometric is related closer to this front view by having it tipped on its side. We're not quite making our part like that, but all will work out just fine. Now 0.7 inches is what we'll shell this as, and shell is also located under the modify panel. It's right here next to fillet. It's like if I took a cup and made it solid, went to the top of it, and removed all of the material except for the wall of the cup. Now in this case, I'm going to leave the options just like they are. It wants me to select on a face to remove, and it wants me to make it 0.07 inches thick on this face. And we'll now see that the windshield is set up the way that it is. It's got a shell all the way through it. It's still solid, but the inside is removed. All right. Now is probably a good point to save your work. You've done quite a bit, and you would hate to lose all of this. Since you haven't saved this part in the past, go ahead and click on the Save icon. And this time, since it is an Automoblox Windshield, we're going to save it in the Automoblox project file folder, and this folder is located here, as you see. If you forget where you've put that before, do search for it. For me, I put it under my Student Inventor Files folder, which is located under my Student Version folder. Automoblox Project, and I want to call this something that has to do with what we're working with, which in this case is a windshield. The activity probably tells you to save it as some file name in your Automoblox part. Let's call it something similar to what we did before. So where this says passenger section with my initials, I'm going to say windshield AWD. Give it something that makes sense so that you can always come back to it, and be sure that it's saved in this same folder. Alright, so we've got it saved, we're ready to move on, we've shelled it, and then it says use the measurements, okay, so T9 dimension drawing sheet again, to create this bottom portion. They don't really give you much direction on that, and it is probably the hardest part to do. And there's a couple of different ways to create this entire windshield. If you search for other videos, you'll find other people's interpretations of how to do this. I'm going to do it in a very specific way. Feel free to follow along. I'm going to start by creating a new 2D sketch, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. This bottom edge, or this bottom face where these two edge lines are, is what I'm going to select. And I'm going to click and drag with my left mouse button on that face so that I create a plane, a sketch plane, that is a particular distance down from this object. And that distance is going to be 0.67, as I notice that from the bottom of the object to the bottom of this new feature that I'm going to create is 0.67 inches. That's where I want to start my sketch. So I'm going to drag this down, and it pops up with a little flyout window that says, oh, how far do you want to go? Well, I want to go 0.67 inches, and it creates a sketch that is offset from that face by 0.67 inches. Okay, from here, I want to look directly at it. I don't care how it's rotated for yours, but for me, I like to have it rotated so that the imagery here in this front view is what I will see here. I want to create a rectangle that is very similar in size to what I see in this front view. More importantly, I want it to be inside of what I've shelled out. So I don't want to go outside of the boundaries of this object. I want to stay inside of it. And I'm going to create dimensions that represent the outside edge of this shelled rectangle that we see. And I'll shell it in the end. And I'm going to do that before I finish this, but I want to show you some different tricks of how I do it. So, starting off with just a 2-point rectangle, trying not to constrain it accidentally to anything, I'll click and drag and pull it out so that it's about this big. Notice that they don't give us the size as much as they give us the location, and they're saying that 2.26 inches is how far it is from the outside edge of this shelled object from before. So I'll constrain this edge with a dimension here all the way down to this outside edge, not the inside. Be careful with that. You want to go to the outside edge. And I'll drag it out to the left, place it, and tell it that it is 2.26 inches. I'll do the same thing for the bottom one. It's 0.29. And this sizes it for me, in at least in this case, the Z direction. It sized it. I also want to locate 2.22 inches from the right edge. So my left edge of this new rectangle, all the way over to the right edge of my windshield is 2.22 inches, and the right edge all the way over to the right side of the windshield is going to be 0.68. So 2.22 for the left edge, 0.68 for the right edge. So now this windshield is set up with a sketch that's 0.67 inches below it, and that sketch has a rectangle that is sized by using nothing more than location dimensions. And it has these, if you look over here very carefully, it has these little knobs that they give you a detailed view of it. And we're going to add those in a little bit. But for right now, we're going to take this object, round off the corners, create some construction lines for setup later on, and then do some extrusions as we see necessary. All right, so let's do some construction lines next. Let's do a line, construction line, and let's set up one that is somewhere over here on the left side of this new rectangle. If you notice, the midpoint is a green dot, and we want to go a little bit to the left of that, and we'll select here and come straight down all the way through this new rectangle so that I am perpendicular to the bottom, or a 90-degree vertical line. And it doesn't matter how long it is, though I do like to bring it all the way down to this bottom edge. I'm going to repeat this over on the right side of this new square, or this new rectangle, again to the right of my midpoint of that line. Okay, I like that. And then I'm going to apply one. I don't know if it's on the midpoint because I haven't measured it, but I know it's going to be close to the midpoint of this vertical line on the left. I'm going to come just a little bit below it, and I'm going to do one that's horizontally moving across. All right. Now I need to dimension those lines. They're these center lines that you see running through here, even though we've drawn them as construction lines. So I'll constrain them. Notice that 1.28 is how far this center line is from the very bottom edge of the windshield. What is truly probably referred to as the back edge of the windshield. And I'll drag it over and place it in here. Maybe clean up my dimensions a little bit. So that you can see them easily. Pull this guy out. Alright, so that gives it its location. That's its location in width, and we know its location in depth. We know its width. It's constrained to this line and this one over here. I'll apply some dimensions to these two construction lines that represent these two center lines, and they are 1.94 from the right and 0.95 from the right respectively. So this guy all the way over to the right edge, 1.94. Move these out for you a little. So I'm going to place another one right here. I'm going to right click and repeat general dimension. It's the same as coming up here to constrain and choosing dimension or hitting D on your keyboard. Place this one. And this guy is 0.95 inches. And at this point now I've got some basic things set up. I could do a few different things. I could go ahead and extrude this feature so that it goes all the way up to touching this inside curved part of the windshield, and it would be solid. And then I could go back and do some changes to the sketch if I want to. Now, the trick is that you probably really want to play with this a little bit. You'll notice that on the detail sketch, there's a little, let's call them rails or knobs that stick out from this feature. They're features in themselves. They're these little pieces here that rub up against the inside opening of that passenger base, or that passenger section that's made out of wood that we made in the previous video. And you'll find that they're what grab the wood. They're what touch it for friction and hold it in place. We don't want those to be shelled. We want the rest of the object to be shelled. Now, I'm going to go ahead and draw them in this sketch. I'm then going to extrude the rectangle once I've filleted for these corner edges so that it goes all the way up. I'll shell it, and then I'll share this sketch, and I'll take those little rectangles that I've created and I'll extrude them as a separate extrusion. That way they don't shell with the rest of it. If that's confusing, it's okay. I think you'll see what I'm doing as we move along. So the next thing that I probably ought to do is some filleting to these corners, but to do it I have to be back in my sketch mode. Alright, so fillet, and I know that those fillets are 0.15. So I like to do this in the sketch mode, though once you've extruded this you could have done it in the extruded mode. I like to have these dimensions available for me for later reference if I need it. But it is totally up to you. It shouldn't mess up your sketch any other than moving some dimensions around. But you can always go back, as you've seen, and adjust them as necessary so that they're located where you can see them easily. I'm going to go ahead and apply these little rectangles, and that's what these things are for. They represent the center, you'll notice here in the detail view, the center of these little rails or knobs that stick out. So this is detail B, and it shows me this knob and this center line running through it. And I can assume, since they're not giving me any other dimensions for the other rails, that they are all the same. So here's the center line, and it says, all right, the entire knob in its, let's reference this right now, it's just a width dimension, is 0.05 inches, and it's 0.09 from the inside of this shell. Well, that's tricky. This is 0.05 for the shell's thickness, and we can see that here as well. So this right here is probably my most important dimensioning tool. Now, when I do the shell, I have to be careful. If I go in and draw this rectangle now, let me show you what happens. I'll click on that coincident point here with the permanently placed blue line and the temporary construction line, and I'll say that this is 0.025 inches in width. And then I can say that the difference between 0.09 and 0.05 is 0.04, then its height must be 0.04. And what that does is it gives me just half of this little rail. Now that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. What I can do is mirror, select just this, mirror it around this edge, and apply it. And I have both now. I could even go in, if I didn't care about this dimension, or if I even wanted to delete that dimension, and I can trim, which is under my Modify panel, this edge out. And I could then say that, well, if I wanted to apply a dimension, there's two edges here, so I can't just select that edge, but I can say from here to here is 0.05. Now that's great. That's where it's supposed to be. And you might think, okay, if I drop in a line here, I can mirror it over and it's right where it needs to be with this edge. Well, let's see if that happens. If it does, we're good to go. Find the midpoint, drop in a line, mirror this feature around this line, and let's apply it. And what we find is that it's not exactly lined up where it should be. And I can't come in and just say, oh, well, then I want you to be vertically constrained with this point to this point here, because it's mirrored from this object, so it's not going to allow for that to happen. All right, that means that you do have to draw it again over on this side, but as you saw, it's not too difficult to make happen. Let me show you another way of going about doing it. I'll select some place over here to the right, bring it up and over, tell it that it is 0.05 in width and 0.04 in height. Unfortunately, I forgot to uncheck my construction line, so I'll highlight it and uncheck construction line. And then I will use my vertical constraints to line these 2 points up with each other, and it shifts it over. And now, if I used my distance measuring tool under the inspect, I would find, or should find, that the distance from this edge to this construction line is 0.025, which is what I wanted it to be. All right, so that gives me those two. Let's do one more. Let's do this one. So under the same sketch, we'll use that same technique as a moment ago. This time it's 0.04 by 0.05. Oh dang, again, not remembering to turn off my construction line. And man, I almost missed it. So now I'll want to say that these things are horizontally constrained with each other. So this point and this end point of the line should be horizontally constrained. Lined up on the same horizontal line is what that would mean, as opposed to on the same vertical line. And they're placed where they need to be, or it's placed where it needs to be. So I have 3 and I need 6. 1, 2, 3 more down here. If this line is truly in the center of this entire rectangle, then I should just be able to take and mirror this and this around this line. And let's see if it works. Oh, not quite. Ever so close. But that's okay. If you don't want to draw them again, you can use a mirror still. You just have to choose line, construction line, find the midpoint of this vertical edge, which happens to be, it appears, right about there. And let's see. Draw this over, drop it in. And you might say to yourself, but I can create them so quick doing it a different way. And that's absolutely correct. You can probably make them, if you're quick with this, by just drawing them again. But just to show you how to use this application. You see the problem that you run into is if you're not directly in the middle, it doesn't quite work. So, what works best for you is up to you, but once you have them drawn in, you can move on. Now you'll notice that I've already drawn in the bottom 2. I did so using a technique that only required 1 dimension. As long as I don't move things around, this should work just fine without having to dimension this square at all. And I can give you an idea of how I did that. I'll show you with this one that I'm going to place over here. Notice how this little dashed line pops up, and it seems to be lining up with the bottom edge of this square. If I'm very careful about it and I click in the right places, I know now that that edge is lined up with where I want it to be based on reference to the left rail that I was creating. And I'll do the same thing here, only now I simply need to put in 1 dimension, 0.04. Now if I had to place another one that was the same size somewhere further along this vertical line, I would make sure that instead of having to put in this 0.04, I line it up with the same dashed lines so that I know that it's 0.04. And you can even tell that with the other dimension that's not being typed in by me, it's already set at 0.05 because I have somewhat geometrically constrained it to the other rail on the left side of this feature. and I'll apply it. And once again, I have forgotten to turn off construction lines before I start that rectangle. So now this object is done for the most part, other than the three-dimensional features. So I'll finish my sketch. I'll extrude this object. Notice that I'm not selecting those small rectangles. I'm only selecting the big one that's been filleted. I want it to go not toward me and not just away from me, because obviously that distance is too far. I want it to go away from me a particular distance, and I don't know what it is because it's such a compound shape that this curve isn't something that I can say, well, one side needs to be this far, and then every, part of an inch as it moves to the left, it curves up. So all I have to do is tell it to go to the next face, and it should select that inside face that was shelled, that was created by the shelling, and select every part of that face to send this object up to. I'll say OK. Now that sketch has been consumed by extrusion 2, and temporarily I have lost that sketch. But no worries, I can get it back in a moment. I now want to shell that inside part so that it's 0.05. And I want it to remove so that it's taking and adding that 0.05 back to the inside of it. So I'm going to choose this inside part or inside selection tool and choose this face, and I'll say OK. I'll now share sketch 2. Go to my bottom view, and you'll see that I can then take this square or rectangle and extrude it up at the same time as I do the other ones, and use the same extrusion method where I tell it to go to the next face so that it makes it just as long as it needs to. I can inspect this and show you that the distance from this edge to this edge is in fact 0.09, which is what I wanted it to be here. And I should be good to go. Now, all I have left to do is extrude, and I will select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 rectangles. Tell them to go not toward me, but rather away from me so that they go to the next face. Notice how it automatically selected it, and it creates this rail that we see on the sides. I'll say OK. I'll right click on my work plane that was created by pulling that sketch plane out, and I'll uncheck the visibility. I'll uncheck the visibility of sketch 2. And other than coloring this green and saving it once more, we're good to go. I'm going to make my inventor window big so that you can see it easily. Under my color selection, it's currently set at default. But if I click that drop down arrow, my window comes down. I can start typing in the word clear, and you'll notice that clear green 1 pops up, and it turns it to a clear green color. This looks very similar to what we see here. And I'm done. All I have left to do is save this and move on to the next part.